Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the 16th episode of the Cut to Scene podcast. Today, it's of course Aditya and Devansh here with you. And we also have a very special guest today. The special guest is Samarth Mahajan. Samarth, hi Samarth.
Hi Aditya, hi Devansh. Thank you for having me
Hello,
here.
hello.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure.
pleasure to have you also. So before we get into the discussion itself, I'll just give a brief intro to Samarth. So Samarth is a non-fiction filmmaker based in Mumbai. He completed his engineering degrees from IIT Kharagpur, which also recognized him as a young alumni achiever recently. And Samarth's film, The Unreserved, which is available on YouTube on the Camera and Shots YouTube channel, tells stories of passengers in the third class of Indian Railways. Samarth and his team have traveled all around the country in the unreserved compartments to shoot this film, and the film also won the Silver Lotus for the best audiography at the 65th National Film Awards. Samarth has also directed a short documentary film called Kazwa about fireflies, or so-called Jugnu, in the tribal village of Purushwadi in Maharashtra, and how these fireflies are entwined with the life of the residents of the village. He has also directed a short film series called Hum Leke Rahenge, which documents India's culture of protest. And he is working on and close to completing Borderlands, or The Borderlands, about how everyday lives intertwine with borders in the Indian subcontinent. Supported by one of the largest ever crowdfunding campaigns for an Indian film, it featured as a work in progress at the 2020 Marché du Film, the business counterpart of the Cannes Film Festival, and it's also an official selection in the India Story category for the Mami Mumbai Film Festival. So yeah, that's a nice CV to have.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think you've done some great research on me. I wouldn't be able to introduce myself like this anywhere.
No, I mean, like, most of this is, I guess, your introductions online, but yeah, something that I've also added. Okay, so I mean, I think we have established through your introduction itself that you never went to a traditional film school, but you of course are working in films and work as a non-fiction filmmaker. So, what do you consider your film school?
My film school, I think my film school is the people I work with. I have been lucky to partner with very cinematic people whose not only, their films are cinematic, their way of life is very cinematic. The way they maintain their house, the way they cook, everything is so filled with love, emotion, and style that the whole thought process has been affected by people around me. Luckily, one of my friends from IIT Kharagpur who went on to produce Unreserved, his name is Akshay, and he is a brilliant cinematographer. He was the first person I collaborated with. When I shifted to filmmaking, I didn't know what the role of a cinematographer is, what the role, if there's a person called an editor. I don't think like if you talk to your parents, I don't think they'll know what an editor is. At least my parents didn't know. So I would say he was the first film school because he taught me what you could do with camera. He shot for Kazwa and shot the fireflies so beautifully. We got awards for cinematography. And I think I am in extreme awe of my editor. All my films have been edited by the same person. His name is Anantapadmanabhan. And he's perhaps the only film school guy we collaborate with constantly. He's from FTI and he's taught me a lot about narrative. He's taught me so much about stuff that he obviously learned over 4 to 5 years at FTI. But through him, I've been able to sort of learn and incorporate it in my work. So, for a person who doesn't go to a film school, I think it's very important to learn a lot of stuff about what goes into this medium because a lot of these things are technical. They are actually, there is a tangible theory behind what you do on an edit, what you do with the camera, what do you do with the sound. So, if you're not going to school, and I am not the one who's going to read books to learn all these things. So, for me, it's been the people.
That's really nice, and that's an interesting point that you brought across about, like, how there is a science behind all of these things, and it's important to know that. I mean, like, cut to scene is also I mean, why we start to cut to scene is also to understand that science. Of course, we are not filmmakers yet. At least one of us is not. And so yeah, so basically, so this is after your college, I'm presuming. So you started making films full time after college, right? So how was it before that? So were you always interested in making documentary films, or were you, how did that spark ignite?
So actually, funnily, I had never given a serious thought to become a filmmaker. So I studied at IIT Kharagpur, and the way you are sort of trained at IITs or for IITs by your parents also is to get a great job.
Of course.
And most of the engineering colleges in our country are aimed at getting a great job. So my whole, I think, idea of a great life was to get a good job. And I was interning with an FMCG company. I'm sure ITC is a well-known name. So I interned with ITC, and it was one of the dream companies I wanted to intern with. So my life was set for me. When I graduated, I had a pre-placement offer from them, and I thought nothing could be better. I used to do these 1 minute ad films for our inter-hall competitions. There used to be an ad design event. That is where I started making films actually. So
Okay.
I used to really enjoy that. But you start doing those things because your seniors are forcing you to participate because they want your hostel to win. But then while doing it, I realized that I actually like doing these things. Although some of these films are available on YouTube and they're very funny to look at. And it's very difficult to believe that someone would base their whole career shift based on these 1 minute things. But yeah, the whole process was so much fun that when I started working after college, I wasn't really feeling great at my workplace. It's something I think, like I have seen people who really enjoy that environment of competition, of presentations, of Excel sheets. But it was not something that was appealing to me. It was
Mhm.
pretty mundane. I wasn't enjoying the work culture. And I think one of the biggest things for me was I particularly wasn't taken in by the fact that even after 14 years of working, you still have to impress your boss.
Mhm.
And that was something that completely put me off, because I respect these people, and when I see them with their bosses, they become different people, and I was like, I don't want to become this person at some point. And so obviously, one of the things was that. Another thing was that in general, I don't think I was really enjoying the amount of time I was spending with Excel sheets, PowerPoints. Uh,
What decisions there है समर्थ मेरे को?
no, so I know, for example, a lot of people who actually enjoy it. I am just telling you my truth. So
No, because I relate. That's what I'm saying. I relate so much. So you're literally telling me what is lying ahead. Yeah, but go on.
so but none of it was apparent till I actually started working. Like till the time I didn't start working, I was very happy getting that job offer and imagining a very settled life. But
Okay.
9 months into my job, I knew this is not what I want to do. That is when I became serious about filmmaking. That is when actually, on a very whimsical level, I quit my job
Mhm.
on Bhagat Singh's Shahidi Divas. And this is something which is coincidental. I didn't plan. I wasn't looking at the calendar and seeing कि वो Bhagat Singh का Shahidi Divas and I'll quit this day. It just so happened. I got out of the cab. I looked at my office and I was like, today I'm gonna quit.
Okay.
So none of my family members knew. My parents didn't know that this is gonna happen. But I did it, and after that is when I was like, now, and I had just turned 25. So there was this quarter life crisis also. Okay, if I have to try something, it is now. Like if I don't
Mhm.
try something that I really want to do now, it is never going to happen. So that
Correct.
is when I shifted to Bombay because I did want to make films. I was pretty ready to fail at it. I had already imagined failing at it and yet wanted to do it. So I called up one of my seniors and told him, I'm coming to Bombay. Please give me a shelter. Please give me home. And he was very happy to sort of help me. And that's how I shifted to Bombay and started making films. And
Oh.
like the first exposure to filmmaking was one of my friends was modeling in Bombay.
Mhm.
So happened to know a friend who was Miss India. And
Mhm.
she introduced me to a director who gave me a second AD role. But a second AD role is a very non-creative, logistical kind of a role. So I was aware this is not something that will teach me anything about filmmaking. And by extreme chance, I got a notification on Facebook from one of my Facebook friends to like his page. And this was a batchmate from IIT Kharagpur who I had only met once on campus. But I knew that he's also into filmmaking. So this is Akshay, who
Okay.
ended up this is Akshay who ended up producing Unreserved. So I got the notification, I saw the page, and I was like, this person is doing some very nice looking work. So I messaged him, we met, we had a beer, And then we just decided to work together because both of us were starting out together. And there was obviously this Kharagpur connection. We both come from the same campus. And luckily, we've just stayed together. Like, it's been 5 years and we're still working together. He's produced almost all my work. So that's where it really started. That's how, we decided to make our first film, the film that you mentioned about Fireflies, Kazwa. It really came out of this fact that we had no budgets. So we literally Googled unique places near Bombay. and we figured out that there's this place called Purushwadi where millions of fireflies come out after the first rains. And we were like, so we contacted a company which did tours to that place. And we met the CEO of that company, and they said, okay, we'll support your travel and stay, but you manage everything else. And we were more than happy. We were like, wow, we've not even started and someone's sponsoring our food, travel and stay. And that's how the filmmaking journey really started.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, and so before we move on to discussion about the film, I just wanted to ask one last question. So I also see in your LinkedIn that you also did a degree from Ashoka University in liberal arts.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean, if you don't mind me asking, why was that? Like, because you've already...
So that actually happened after 1 year of filmmaking. I shifted to Bombay, and that is the period when I directed Kazwa as well as Unreserved. Now, I think one of the very interesting things about just exploring a career which is not conventional is, and especially which is new, is you don't get to know you're good at it till a long time. And for the kind of person I was, I definitely did not get to know because there weren't enough people telling me I'm good. Like Kazwa obviously won awards, but a filmmaker's dilemma always starts after finishing one film because everything has to start afresh. You're done with a film, so something new has to come up. So Unreserved happened, but I was totally not sure if filmmaking is the thing I want to do after doing 1 year of filmmaking. Because one, I wasn't sure about the kind of change it can create. At that point, I was a bit obsessed with the idea of change. So is it better that I start working in the social sector to explore the idea of change, or do I continue making films? So I wanted to give that whole thing a chance. I think another motivation was that I was pretty tired also. I had 13 months of struggle in Bombay. Like, we were constantly making films. So YF seemed like a nice space, which would also give me space to learn. Like, as engineer turned filmmakers or engineer turned people who are socially conscious, our knowledge is very low. We don't usually know what is happening outside in India. We don't understand politics. We don't understand history. So policy, what is policy? So I wanted to understand all those things. So I think there was this idea of learning, and then there was this idea of if I want to explore certain other things, if I want to explore how would it be to work in policy, or how would it be to work as a researcher or do a master's and go into academia, I wanted to explore those things. I was still not very sure that I wanted to be a filmmaker, even after making Unreserved, because we had just finished it, but it had obviously not won the national award. It had not gone, we had not released it on YouTube to such nice reception. So, we weren't even sure if we made a nice film.
Right. Yeah, I understand. And the fact that
So you went in through YIF.
Yeah.
So how has that helped you in the filmmaking journey after that?
So actually, interestingly, because I had done a feature film before going to YIF, I think craft-wise, I was pretty much happy. Like, in terms of what the filmmaking process is, the kind of thought process that goes into it. But I think how YIF helped me was it provided a lot of context. Something like Borderlands, I wouldn't be able to do without YIF, because I think with Unreserved, I think the beauty is that it's a very simple idea that we decided that we'll travel in the general compartments and we'll just talk to people. And then it was mostly people who sort of drove the conversations. And if the conversations had to become political, they became because people had a lot of control. With something like Borderlands, when I specifically say that I'll go to the border areas of India, it's a very thought out decision. It's not so impulsive as traveling in third compartments, not as organic also, because when you are in a border area, you can be in a third class of Indian Railways and no one will ask you, why are you here? But if you are at a random border area, people are going to ask you, what are you doing here? Why have you come from Bombay to this place? And then the kind of stories you approach is much more thought out. So, and it has a lot to do with my consciousness that why are borders important in India's context? Why are borders important in the global context? My own identity as someone who was born in a border area. So I think without YF, I wouldn't be able to do something which is on a thought level, it requires preparation.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I actually latched on to one of your things that, as engineers, we are not aware of a lot of the politics and social problems that a country faces. And I think this is one thing that we also talked about on an earlier episode. I don't remember which. But yeah, that's really interesting that to change that, you sort of wanted to go to YAF.
Yeah.
Anyway, YAF is Young India Fellowship, if somebody didn't know on the podcast. Okay, anyway, so let's just move on and talk about your film. So you've only so far, I guess, made documentary films. I don't know if you've made feature films. I mean, feature films. By feature films, I mean fiction films. So would you know how the process of conceiving a documentary film is different from that of a fiction film?
I think in terms of conceiving, actually, if you don't take pre-production into account, like pre-production obviously is different. Like in a fiction film, you write a script before you actually shoot. In a documentary, what you would do is probably write a concept note or say something like a treatment note, which is not exactly, because in a documentary, what happens is you can't script it. That's the whole point of a documentary. For me, for the kind of films I do, like there are documentaries which are scripted, dramatized, narrated, but my films don't have narration. There's no dramatization also. So for me, I think what's very important is it's a very organic process. Like with Unreserved, I think the idea was that our team had been doing a lot of projects about travel. So how I got into nonfiction was actually because Akshay's company was only doing nonfiction. That's how I got into nonfiction. It was not something that I really thought out very clearly. But once I started doing it was a lot of fun because we were mixing travel with filmmaking, and I really enjoy traveling and talking to people. I think that is where my motivation lies. I get to go to newer places, talk to very new people. So with Unreserved, the motivation was as simple as that we want to travel on trains. And interestingly, what happened was I tried to get permissions to shoot inside the trains. And when I tried to get those permissions, I was told that I'll have to pay 1 lakh rupees every day to the Indian Railways.
Yeah.
And then we were sort of stuck for a few months because we didn't have that kind of money. Like for 17 days of shoot, you're spending 17 lakhs just to be able to shoot. So initially, the idea was to actually travel in multiple classes. We would travel in third AC, we would travel in sleeper class. But this problem made it very easy for us because we were like, see, if we shoot in third AC, we'll get caught. If we shoot in a sleeper, we may get caught, but no one is gonna come in the general compartments. So it's such like you can't plan it. It came out of a problem that you can't shoot in third AC. So that's how we were like, oh, let's do general dabba only then. So the conception in that sense was very organic. But then obviously there were motivations. I ended up reading one of Mahatma Gandhi's essays of his travel in third class of Indian Railways, which was very interesting because he wrote it in 1917. And whatever he had written, it was so very well applicable in 2016 when we were shooting it. So I was amazed that no one had done any film on general dabbas. I Googled, I YouTubed. So it seemed like the right thing to do. Now, with the fiction, I think even if you conceive something, you would want a certain amount of time for scripting, to write the screenplay before you actually go down to shoot. Like there are some filmmakers who don't do that. They are very organic. They develop their script on the shoot. But then there's this whole idea of finding the actors and finding the whole crew. It's a bigger crew usually. But for me, it was just me, my cinematographer, and my AD. We were a 3-people crew. So once we knew that, okay, we had decided that we are going to do it in general dabbas, it didn't take us even 1 month to plan the whole thing. And the only planning that we did was that we'll travel. We didn't even prepare a questionnaire. There was no questionnaire.
So there was no structure to what you were going to do, is it?
No, not at all. Like with Unreserved, there was no structure at all. So
Mhm.
I'll probably also give you some insight into how we planned for Borderlands, which is a bit different, but
Mhm.
still it's very organic. So with
Mhm.
Unreserved, we had no structure. Like I didn't imagine how it would look on an edit. I just wanted to be out and have some honest conversations. This much I knew, that people should be able to open up to me. Huh?
So yeah, so the only structure you might have had is just planning the train journey itself, I guess.
Yes, yes,
Like,
yes, yes, yes. So I booked all the tickets beforehand. I love
okay,
planning travel. So
okay.
there was no compulsion on us to do it in one go,
Mhm.
but just on a, like, I am very excited about travel usually. So it seemed very exciting to do it in one go, to be able to travel the whole of India on a single 17-day journey. And it seemed like if we get into a flow, it'll help the film.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we could have very well planned it as 10 separate trains at different times, And we didn't even go back to shoot anything. Like a lot of people ask me sometimes that, did you shoot it over a course of 6 months or 3 months? But we never went back to any of those trains after we had done those 17 days of travel. So
Mhm.
the only thing we did was book those trains and book some hotels
Mm.
wherever we were going to stop. And tell some friends, like if we had a friend in Delhi, we would tell them that we'll come and stay over and please make good food.
Nice, nice.
so so
Yeah.
that was that. But say, for example, if I was to say something about Borderlands, here there is very tangible pre-production. Like we researched stories, like on the India-Bangladesh border, for example, we would research and shortlist 4 stories. That these are 4 interesting stories. Now, how would we shortlist is something that borders obviously come with their own themes. There's a theme of separation. There's a theme of trafficking. There's a theme of women getting rescued and getting stuck in shelter homes after being trafficked, and then there's conflict, for example, in Manipur and Kashmir. So we would try and have stories which were sort of exclusive in that sense, that they were touching on different themes. And then we would create an active network, reach out to all the NGOs, researchers who worked on it, talk to them beforehand before going to shoot. And in my mind, I would always imagine a character. For example, one of the stories that we really wanted to do was about a divided family between Bangladesh and India. And
Mhm.
because we got to know about this one event which happens only once a year, where divided families come and meet each other and greet each other Happy New Year. It's a once a year event where people come near the fence and then they exchange gifts, they exchange cigarettes, ice creams, chocolates. It's a very crazy kind of an event. So I imagined a character who would come to this event, meet their family. How would it be to not be able to see them for the whole year and then see them only once? So this was already imagined before we started shooting. So
Mhm.
this is very different. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. So there's like a mental storyboard that you have of
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. But it's almost like writing a log line. I would write a log line. Yeah, Devansh,
Right.
you're saying something?
But then these characters would be real people, right? Like these are not fictional. Like I get that you've imagined the story,
Huh.
but the manifestation of it is an actual family, right?
For sure, and that's I think what makes it a documentary ultimately, because whenever I would imagine this character, it would be a very simplistic character. The character wouldn't have any real traits, so to say. But when we
Mhm.
go on the ground during our recce, we try and find people who would be close to what we are imagining, but they would always be so much more interesting or so much more complicated. Like we imagined doing a story of a girl who was stuck in a shelter home, like a Bangladeshi girl who's stuck in a shelter home because she was rescued from trafficking. And what happens is these repatriation processes are very complicated. It takes like 3-4 years for them to go back to their homes. Now, this is the only thing that I had imagined. I wanted to explore the idea of confinement with that character. Now, the final character that we got is a character who obviously all of this happened to her. But then I think what her story is a love story actually. She was married to someone outside the shelter home, but when she came to the shelter home, she fell in love with someone inside the shelter home with another girl. And that not only expanded her idea of love and sexuality, but in some ways gave her hope while she was stuck in this shelter home. And now that other girl has been repatriated. So she's alone. But she is imagining a life outside the shelter home with the partner. So this is something that happened on the shoot. We could have never imagined it happening in my mind. So that's what I'm talking about. I think you obviously start out with certain ideas, but in a documentary, what happens is when you are on the location, you either accept that the idea is not working, or the fact that it is so much more nuanced. With fiction, I think because you have a script, you can't deviate a lot. I'm sure some directors do, but because you have a script, you already know this is what you are set out to do. With a documentary, it can take you in very diverse directions. Yeah.
Right. So, since we are talking about this, I think an essential component, like I even noticed in Unreserved, let's say, that an essential component of that format was that you need to win trust, right? And you need to
Yeah.
win, like in a format like Unreserved, especially, I think you need to win trust in a shorter span of time. Uh, so,
Yeah.
what has your experience been on that front? Like, how do you go about dealing with that?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important thing is to have a conversation without the camera. So even when we were doing Unreserved, so Unreserved process was very different because uh, my cinematographer would keep his camera out. So people would already know that we are doing something with the camera. And
Mhm.
then I would start talking to them. I would tell them my motivations. I would share a lot about my own self. I would tell them that I am someone who's left my career to do this. I am really passionate about making films, and I'm doing this journey around India and talking to people. And that's all that I'm doing. I would explain it to them that I'm not from a media channel. I'm not from TV, and this is not a live thing that is happening. So, and I would try and do it all of that with a smile, while obviously sharing a lot about myself. So I think that idea of reciprocity is very important, because if you've gone in and you're just asking people questions, they feel intimidated. And especially if they don't understand where you're coming from, why you're doing it. Again, it makes people question your intentions and doubt you. So I would try and remove that doubt. Now, what happens is it doesn't work every time. What you see in the film, obviously, you see 11 characters who've really opened up. But we ended up talking to around 120 people. And many times people were very uncomfortable till the end of an interview. So all of that obviously wouldn't make it to the film. So it's a hit and trial thing. You talk to someone, and if they feel good about you, I think they'll give you consent, and they'll also open up about their life. Now with Borderlands, I think because we are there and we are not just shooting for 3 hours, we're shooting for a week or 2 weeks sometimes. So we met our characters multiple times. We would try and talk to the village heads also, so that they trusted us. Because many times what happens is people are looking up to their village heads or sarpanches to say that, okay, you can trust these people, you can give the interview. Like inside a shelter home, because it's an institution, the director of that NGO would go with us and talk to the girls ki, okay, these are trustworthy people, you can tell your story to these people. And even after that, there's a marked out time where we will spend time with each of these people you want to interview, just removing all the doubts that they would have. But I think it's a process which people also figure out with time. Like in a single character story where you're spending 5 years with a person, the trust gaining process is very different, and sometimes it also takes 3 to 6 months, because you want that kind of depth in your relationship.
So fine. So of course, you said that you ask them a lot of questions without the camera on. But then, for example, the questions that you've included in the answers that you've included in the film, they don't come most times. They don't come with pre-planned. I mean, there's no question preceding the answer. I mean, what are the ethics of that? I mean, I'm just asking as like a viewer. Like, what is the ethics of asking up? I mean, just getting the answer without knowing the question that you asked.
So to give you more context on this, I'll just tell my experience right now. I was rewatching the Unreserved, and
Okay.
so I just noticed that it has been edited in this way that everything that you said preceding the conversation, other than follow up questions, have been cut out, right? So then the viewer does not know the context of the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is what I wanted to
So
ask.
actually, the film has been cut in a way that you are already inside a conversation. So the mostly the build up to the conversation is usually not the most exciting part, and I am not the focus of the film. The focus of the film is the people. So we very consciously decided that all the stories will start with them, and so that's one thing. But otherwise, there are actually a lot of parts in the film where I am very actively a part of the conversation. In fact, that's a very stylistic choice and also part of our approach, because we don't have a questionnaire. So everything happens very organically. I'm sitting with you, for example. This conversation was different. For example, the conversation with the two Muslims about
Mhm.
Muhammad. That is
Right.
one story which actually starts with my question, where I am the one who's starting the story and saying, "Ke, acha, this film is coming up. What are your thoughts?" So that in that story, you actually have context, because it's my exploration of how what do they think about this film, and do they like it or not. But with other stories, they were more personal stories. They were not about such a worldly thing. So that happened. And I think ethically, it's pretty fine till the time we are empowering our characters, till the time we are making them come across as lovable people. And I think with all the characters, at least that I try to approach, there is no tendency to mock them or make fun of them. I think that's the best you can do on an ethical front in a documentary, to
Mhm.
make your characters come across as lovable people. Not like, I don't like poverty porn. It's very easy to make poverty porn. Make so Obviously we are in the general dabba, everyone's mostly poor. So
Yes.
why do we have to talk about it, and what is going to come out about it? So sympathy versus empathy is a very standard thing that we talk about. So the idea is to make you empathize with them and not sympathize, ke, oh bichara, or oh poor chap. So I think till the time you are in that zone, even the other approach, I won't say it's ethically wrong. There's nothing ethically wrong with it, but I think it's something which doesn't empower the characters. So if you are anyhow making a film, you are the one who's gaining out of this whole exercise. Their life is not changing. The least we can do is accord respect.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this it's really good that you bring poverty porn up, and that's one of the things that I really liked about your film, that it does not make it poverty porn. And there's actually something that we discussed in the previous episode, which we did about a movie called Capernaum. It's this
Ha, 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 ha. Mhm.
movie which won the Cannes, Venice or Cannes, one of them. Right. So yeah,
Mhm.
even there the director does not make it poverty porn and empowers the characters a lot. So yeah, that's really interesting that you say that. So one more thing I wanted to ask is, how do you ensure, or is it even is it even like required to ensure that your characters in the film are actually speaking the truth, or are they just putting on a facade of originality about, let's say for example, that guy who says that I have multiple girlfriends, right?
Ha, ha, ha,
And
ha, ha.
so things like that. So is how does that work?
See, you'll never know, because the idea of truth also, like a documentary, some people say a documentary is a factual thing. Like a documentary is many times not a factual thing. It's you understand what propaganda is. So every
Mhm.
film you make is propaganda ultimately, because you are obviously editing out things while framing. You are choosing to edit out certain things. So you're always going to get some part of the truth. On a very intellectual level, I'm saying. But on an emotional level, I'm saying that if someone is able to move you, someone's story is able to move you, I think it's their truth, and it's okay to just accept it as their truth. It need not be your truth. In their mind, it is how they believe they are. So
Mhm.
I think it's okay to sort of just have it like that. I don't
Right.
get into questioning my character so much, because if they are trusting me enough to let me shoot them, I would like to trust them enough to believe that okay, they are mostly telling something which they believe in.
Mhm.
Um, and whatever seems very unnatural is not usually in the film. We edit it out. Like sometimes people are purely sharing opinion about
Mhm.
politics, about certain things which we don't agree with, and sometimes they say factually wrong things. So
Right.
here it's mostly, for example, if he's saying he has multiple girlfriends, I cannot start an investigation. One is not Riya Chakraborty. Second, I do not have the resources to do that. And but the way he's telling it, he is coming across as a fun person to hear, and somewhat of the contradiction is inherent in what he says. Like he would talk to uh, more people, but his girlfriend probably wouldn't be able to. So
Right.
if someone is being honest enough to share that, I think it's okay. Matlab, I don't have to critically. So this truth idea, no, even we call documentaries, क्या बोलते हैं इसको? Creative treatment of reality.
Mhm.
It is a creative treatment of reality many times, because you can't have reality as reality. So you will edit it to make it more interesting. You will not have certain parts. So for example, Devansh asked me, okay, my question is not there. But actually, with all these characters, the moment when they ask us to stop shooting, or when I know that the interview is done, those moments are also not there. And those are also very because if you keep on putting it, the edit structure of the film would go for a toss. It will seem like the film is beginning and ending again and again. So these decisions are also related to the craft.
Right. It's
Right.
great that you talk about the edit structure of the film, because that was going to be our next question. So for example, this film is edited with what you said, 11 stories, right?
Yeah.
Was this pre-decided at all? Like the fact that
No, nothing was pre-decided. We went in to make a 20-minute short film.
okay,
And the initial idea was that I'll be a protagonist. That was also one of the ideas. Ki I'll be a protagonist who's traveling. So on day 1 or 2, we actually shot me also. And it was
okay,
looking so funny, so bad, that we decided this is not going to work out. So let's just focus on the people, and let's try to get as many honest, emotional stories as possible. And the nice thing about independent filmmaking is that you're not answerable to a lot of people. So
right.
I had the independence to really experiment and then shoot organically. It was much more authentic. Like, it was, if you saw me in that film, I think it would be so sad. You're looking at me and I'm pretending to, I don't even know what I would be doing in the frame. So,
Right.
like, one of the shots we took, I was actually what I was actually pissed with my assistant director. So in the shot, I'm pissed with my assistant director and telling him, why are you not copying the footage nicely and all that. So all of that you don't want to see in the film, no?
Right. Right. Right.
So it was not decided. Yeah.
But for example, there are really sorry, Raghvan.
Go ahead,
So
go ahead,
but
go
there
ahead.
are there are these really I mean, at least I don't know if these were like conscious choices, but there are these really good moments in the film. For example, there is this where you talk to the person whose daughter has a tumor, and in there, like, so that conversation I actually thought was like very well split into two parts, where in the start he is like telling about his life, and then there is a pause of around 4 or 5 seconds where there is this background noise going on, and then there is this he almost breaks down. And that, I mean, I don't know if it was a conscious choice or not, or it was just unconsciously there, but I really love that. So what do you have anything to say about that?
So I think while shooting, obviously nothing was planned. While
Yeah.
shooting, when I started talking to him, I had no idea if his daughter has tumor, or
Mhm.
that he'll break down, or that while he's breaking down, there'll be this crazy person selling biryani and selling bisleri who will keep on shouting. And at
Mhm.
some point, this vendor actually puts that whole bisleri ka dabba on him,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is very, like, it looks very harsh also. It has a certain drama, but you can't plan it, and that's where I think the beauty of a documentary is, you can't plan it. But
Mhm.
yes, it was a conversation which happened over an hour. So to be on the edit table and choose parts, that is where the craft is, I think. And that, I think, my editor has done nicely to use those moments. Because if there was, for example, some other editor, he might have cut that pause, thinking
Mhm.
that, he's not talking in this part, it's useless.
Right.
But what
Yeah.
that pause allows you to do is really feel the kind of life. And it's like, to me, what that does is, when this person keeps on shouting biryani le lo, while this person is breaking down, is
Yeah.
that even if they are in the same space, it's so normalized, this pain. It may be a lot of pain to us because we live in a very different India, we come from a very different place of privilege. But there is this other India where even if you're opening up about the deepest parts of your life, the other person is more concerned about selling biryani. And you know that it's right. It's not something for which you'll hold this other person guilty. That why are you not? This person is being so emotional. Why are you doing this? So all of a sudden you are put into something very real. And I think one is obviously the shooting experience of it, and editing is where you sort of try and build it up, the mood of it, the pace of it. So that was definitely, I think, planned.
Right.
That
I
is
think
something.
the audio in the background, of course, this biryani lelo and whatever bisleri lelo or all that also adds to it a lot. And like how, I mean, just a technical question. How did you go around recording these things? Were there like multiple mics or just one mic? Or how was it?
There's this handheld device called Zoom H6. It's
Uh-huh.
a very standard device which you also see a lot of these hosts roaming around with, like or most of the digital media outlets like Scoop Whoop or Quint. That is the
Mhm.
instrument that these people use, and you can actually see it in the film many times. Like we've
Yeah,
made
yeah.
no effort to hide it because we knew that if we don't get people's sound, what is the point of doing this film? And the only way we were going to get that sound is if the mic was close to their mouths. So there was just one mic, and although there was a sound design to the film, but
Mhm.
whatever is happening during the interviews is it's mostly just by chance that those things were happening. We didn't add these layers very actively. For a film like Unreserved and for the kind of films I try to make, we try and keep it in a very real realm. We don't try to do many things to the basic footage because it then just starts looking unnatural.
Mhm.
So with Unreserved also, we just had one mic which I was roaming around with, and
Mhm.
I don't think I actively did random sound recordings. Whatever was recorded mostly was recorded during an interview.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
So what I find very interesting, sorry, just a question. What I find very interesting is that first of all, this is like a revision to a lot of previous episodes where we have talked about a lot of concepts like say ethics or empathy and stuff like that, right?
Hmm.
But the way you're talking about things and the way you're addressing some subjects, uh, it appears to me like you come across as an ethnographic researcher almost, wherein you're trying to put yourself in that crowd and trying to understand them, right? And that sort of a position, that sort of a background is different from that of a commercial proposition of making a film, right? So how do you
Hmm.
sort of balance that? How does that come about?
So between like, balancing
Yeah,
off.
like between the quest to know something and to find the
Huh?
truth of it, and then the other side, which is the commercial side, which needs to be done
Okay,
for visibility
okay.
purposes.
So I think till the time, this is a question which I have started asking myself now. When we were doing Unreserved, we were just so happy to do the process that I didn't care about what is going to come out of it, where is it going to go. And I think that's why it's such an honest film, because there's just no second thoughts about is this commercially going to make sense? Is this going to sell? The idea was just to really experience the process. So,
Correct.
and with the whole ethnographic part, I do feel that my approach is very participative, because there are a lot of documentaries which are very observational, and I would say they're much more ethnographic in an academic sense, because ethnography is also about observation and not actually participating so much. But
Mhm.
mine is so conversation driven that actually, uh, while while actively you may not have parts on me, but throughout the film you'll probably also understand me as a person. I am there, I'm sitting, you understand what are the themes I'm interested in. In a purely ethnographic study, the researcher is sort of supposed to detach. Here I am very actively engaging with the emotional aspects of it. With the commercial side, I think with Borderlands I've become more aware of it, because this is the first film that I'm producing also. So I never produced before this. So this time I know that okay, whatever we are doing, not only do we have to experience it and find some emotional truth to someone's existence, but then also make it a commodity and be able to put it out in a market space. And I can't tell you how excruciating that is, because these are it's almost like a split personality disorder sometimes. um, so the only thing you can do, I think, one is obviously, if you have more and more experience, I think you become more and more comfortable with it. With me, what I have managed to do somehow is, because our shoots are so much dependent on travel, the day I would leave for the shoot, I would try and forget that I'm a producer, that I have budgets to care about, that I'm answerable to certain investors. I would honestly try and just forget it. I would like not answer calls, not reply to texts. Some of my friends would text me in May, I would reply to them in August. So I would usually try and get into a zone with my stories. And I think that works for me because I'm in a very new situation, new place. And many of these places actually, fortunately, do not have cell phone network also. So I am almost in my own bubble where I can take a break. But there is this whole idea when you come back from the shoot, all of a sudden you're back to the real world when you're in Bombay. And then you sit with your producer and then you start thinking about, oh, do we have the budgets? How are we going to sell it? And in a very ideal scenario, and this is what I advise a lot of young filmmakers. I would probably advise myself also. If you can find a producer who understands your work, can probably think about the commercial aspects, there's nothing better for a director, because then they don't have to get into it. But the other side is, with independent filmmaking, the ideas are usually so personal that it's very difficult to find someone who's on the same wavelength. So I also tell very passionate filmmakers to learn producing. So it's something which is, because you, high chances are you will not find that producer who will think about that. And what happens is, dheere dheere I realized that making the film is only half the job done. What happens to the film once it's made? If you are not putting in effort to take it to an audience, it's everything is a waste, right? So the person who's going to be most passionate about wanting an audience, I think, is the director. So I don't think there's a balance between those two parts, as Devansh asked me. But I'm like really struggling to find that balance, and really, really want to find that balance.
In fact, that actually throws me back to this conversation that we had with actually the first filmmaker we had on this podcast, that was Satyanshu Singh. So and Sati sir was like, he felt that he was extremely lucky because he got producers who trusted him with his creative
Exactly.
approach and his story.
Exactly. Because if you have that producer, no, he will take that load off your shoulders.
Right.
You do your creative bit and do it thoroughly, and then once you're done with it is when you start thinking about the commercials, rather than, how probably Karan Johar वगैरह film बना रहे हैं कि पहले you think that okay, these 5 things are going to make great commercial sense, and then you put it in the film.
So, I mean, like, just shifting away from the topic a bit. So, so you talked about the sound design of the film, which is basically the recording of the sound. But I also noticed that your films, at least Kazwa and Unreserved, have very good other soundtracks also. So you used Indian Ocean in Unreserved and Manavyala Kincharadate in the. So how was the process of going around and deciding that? It's just like personal taste, or like is there some meaning to it?
I think the meaning, first meaning is marijuana, I think. Because not only I want to bring it up for very political reasons for what is happening with weed, but to be very honest, I think it's a very organic process. Like with Kazwa, what we did was we obviously edited first. Like you usually edit and then you try to find musical references. That's the standard process before going into original music creation. So with Kazwa, what we did was we had a cut, and I hired a very young music composer whose work I was not feeling very comfortable with. Like I wasn't enjoying the track. So me and my editor were sitting and we thought, let's surf SoundCloud and try to find a good music reference. So it's 2 a.m. and we are completely out of our senses. And that is when we chance upon this track. And it gives us such a trip. And I think I can go back to that day and still relive that in my memory, because it was so vivid. And I was like, this is perfect music. This is the music I want. And obviously, I think the good thing about being very less experienced is you don't know when you're being unrealistic. So you try and do unrealistic things, and sometimes they materialize. So what I simply did was, we heard it on SoundCloud, on Karthik Ayer's SoundCloud account, and I had no idea that Karthik Ayer actually plays for AR Rahman, or that he's a bigwig. So I just messaged him like a complete, how IIT or engineering guys propose to very beautiful girls in their first year. It's very similar to that. So I messaged, and I sent him the cut, that this is the 9-minute film, and from this portion to this portion we've used your music and we've put a credit. So I'd already put the credit and everything. And I was like, see, this is what we've done. We really like the track. We are independent filmmakers and we would love to keep it, and need your permission. And so something very, very fundamental. And I still, like, I am amazed that he replied that, it's completely fine how you've done it. I really like how you've used it. Please go ahead. And half of my teammates were shocked because no one was thinking that this will happen. And that's again one thing I keep on telling budding filmmakers, to actually try out things. And the fact that people actually are very helpful. And literally almost the same thing happened with Indian Ocean. I think my editor had found the track, and he put it there, and I loved it. And the idea always starts from a musical reference, that this is the reference and we'll create original music. But once you hear some tracks, you are like, ye hum kaise banayenge yaar? How can we create this track? So again, I found Indian Ocean's email ID. I just wrote a very simple email. And in fact, there I remember I even did not put the film there because the film was not ready. So I just wrote such a bad email, like it was a 2-line email. Like if you send such an email to me, I will not reply. So I wrote that, oh, we are a group of young independent filmmakers. We really like this song. We want to use it in our film. And I didn't even tell what the film is. So their manager replied, and very nicely replied that we will have to know what the film is, how you're using it. And then I finally sent the film to them. And they just agreed to it. And I think they just realized that we're very poor seeing the film, because obviously we're shooting in General Dabbas and it's done in a very bare bones manner. So we never talked money. They never asked for a license fees, which was beyond epic. And they let us use it.
Right.
It's very like, so it's very simple that way. Like before the edit, we had no idea we'll be using these tracks, and getting those tracks was a matter of just reaching out and being polite in asking for permissions.
Right. So I remember this is a person I looked. So after Divya, our mutual friend, had watched the film, she used to sing it in office, like for 1 or 2 months. She used to just sing that song. I was like, "What are you singing? Like, why are you singing this?" And that's how I actually got to know about your film.
Okay. But it's a beautiful track. It's a lovely track.
Oh,
Leaving Home.
Yeah. Devansh, you have questions?
But that's an interesting point that we should remember for our future episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should just reach out to people. If you have a dream and someone can help you achieve it, you just write to them that I need this help, and the worst that will happen is they'll say no.
No.
So we were always ready for Indian Ocean to say no. I wouldn't be very agitated if they said no.
Yeah, what's to lose?
What's to lose? Exactly.
We have this agenda of starting and ending our podcast with as much indie music as possible. So we try. And our approach is generally the same, that we just send out messages to these bands and we are like, can we use the music? So yeah,
Beautiful.
nice to know. So one question was that, so since it is non-fiction storytelling, and I think this is also answered in some other parts of the conversation, but since it is non-fiction, um, what is the exact role of the interviewer in making this? Because like, okay, so for example, like we can see that there are points maybe where people are saying the wrong things, or people are saying things that you might disagree with, but you take a non-prescriptive approach to it, right? You do not go about correcting them, but you rather listen. So How does that come about? And like it, I'm guessing it must have taken you a couple of takes to understand that, right?
Yeah, I think the it starts from understanding what's the focus of the film. And the focus of the film is the people that I'm meeting. The focus of the film is not me. So if the focus was me, then I would probably be cutting them much more, inputting my own opinion. But if you know that it's going to be about them and them being their natural selves, and I may be a politically correct person, but do I have to prescribe everyone the same amount of political correctness? I don't have that right. You can have your own opinion. So I think if you have that mindset, that is in the kind of films I make, the role of an interviewer is to form an emotional bond with the interviewee. The idea is to make them so uncomfortable that they can tell you about themselves, not to get the most politically correct things out there, because that everyone knows. Like that Kashmiri might, if I told him that I don't want you to be a Pakistani supporter, he could have very well said something else entirely, or said, no, I don't want to give you an interview. So how would you get that opinion which can then evolve? Because I think what is important is, by the end of the story, you don't see him as a Pakistani supporter. You see him as a young person who has his own conflicts, who has his own reasons for certain things. So he gets humanized. And that's what I think a lot of us are not doing these days. I think why, and this is a standard problem with liberals across the world, they're not listening. Like the whole cancel culture, also, or whatever, there are a lot of movements where people are not given a chance to speak, and people are dismissed. So I try to avoid that. And in fact, with Borderlands, it's very interesting because we have interviews in Bengali, Nepali, Manipuri, and these are languages I do not speak. So I had associate directors in every region who I had to train to think like this, to almost become my mirrors, to pass on a feeling that this is the feeling I want to explore. Yeah, this is what I want to explore about a person, and get them on the same page that they'll do it in as non-judgmental a way as I would try and do it ideally. So sometimes it doesn't happen. So those stories don't make it. Like sometimes I do become judgmental. Like I remember meeting some very hardcore RSS BJP supporter on Unreserved, with whom I got into this very different kind of a conversation where I was also sharing my opinion. That obviously didn't make it to the film.
So yeah, like of course, it comes across that you don't shy away from taking political stances and all in your film also, which is actually exemplified by this series that you did, Hum Leke Rahenge, right? So first of all, how did that idea come into existence? And second, so there are like different protests that you cover across in that series, and there's just one protest which is by the right wing, let's say by a BJP about West Bengal, I guess.
Right.
And that film has a different tone as compared to the others.
Yeah.
So how much part does subjectivity play in making these films?
I think subjectivity is everything. If you take away subjectivity, it's no longer my film. See, because I am not a journalist. If I was a journalist, I would be under that pressure of maintaining objectivity. But I think when we were talking about films, and that's where I think I like to see this whole, even if it's non-fiction, it's ultimately a film. So the distinction between a non-fiction and fiction goes away for me. The idea is more important, that what does the author want to explore. So subjectivity, I think, is what is making it personal.
Right.
Now, Hum Leke Rahenge came out just after I graduated from YIF. So I had been very freshly indoctrinated with a lot of thoughts. If I go back, I would do it very differently. So Borderlands is a very different film. So, but I was in that phase where I think I wasn't so political at any other point in my life when I was doing, as compared to when I was doing Hum Leke Rahenge. So the idea actually came from my producer at that point. So that film was produced by a different person. That film I did in Delhi. So I was working with a production house called Kahani Wale. So they wanted to do something around protests. And then my idea was that obviously that series came out, but more importantly, another film came out of that series, which is called We the People. So my problem with the whole protest discourse was everything had become about Umar Khalid, Shaila Rashid, Kanhaiya Kumar. So these individuals had hijacked the conversation for me. And although they're talking very important things, my experience of Jantar Mantar was that there used to be people who were protesting for very personal reasons and sitting there for 3 to 5 years. For example, one of the characters in my film is a person who's dead on paper because he married a Dalit girl. He was so his relatives and the local officials collaborated and like proved him dead on paper, but he's actually alive. So he's protesting to basically be acknowledged as a person who's alive. So those are the kind of things I wanted to focus on. And while we were doing that film, we would attend protests, and out of those protests, this series came out. And I attended that protest, the Save Bengal protest, and it looked like such a sham. And so yeah, it did have a sarcastic tone to it, and but then it like we did allow them to say what they wanted to say. Like we kept the messaging of the protest that what it is about. At the same time, I don't want to make anyone feel that I subscribe to it. So I would treat it in a way where that even if the protest is this, the maker definitely is not in sync with what is happening in the protest. So yeah.
Right. So it reminded me very much of a few pro CAA protests that I saw in Bangalore here. Yeah,
It's
because
literally the same people. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, I guess it's been a nice conversation so far. So just to end things, what are your favorite documentary films ever or fiction films?
So actually, I like a lot of films by there are these two specific types of filmmakers. One is Werner Herzog. I really like Werner Herzog. He made this film called Grizzly Man. Grizzly Man is, I think, one of my favorite documentaries. You've seen it?
No, I've not watched it. I've heard about it a lot.
Okay. So it's a beautiful film. I think it really. So the thing with Werner Herzog is the way he narrates. So I never use narration, but if someone had to narrate, I think that Werner Herzog is like the pinnacle or benchmark of how a film should be narrated. Then there is this film called Close Up by Abbas Kiarostami. It's again very interesting. So without trying to give a spoiler, I really want everyone to know the concept because I really want people to watch the film. It is a film about a person who impersonated a film director in Iran and lived with a family pretending to be that filmmaker. So this was a real thing that happened. So Kiarostami got to know about this incident in a newspaper that there's this person who impersonated a director, stayed with a family, and then got caught. Now Kiarostami got excited about making this film. So he went back to the same people to reenact how everything happened. So he went to the prison, and this is a part of the film where he's convincing the person, why don't you enact for my film how you pretended to be this filmmaker and how you duped this family. He went back to the family and convinced them to do this again. And that is the film. So what happens is, I think the boundaries between reality, fiction, they really dissolve because something that happened for real is being reenacted by the same people. And it's done in a very nice way because the film is very self-aware that it's being fictionalized. So there are certain portions where Kiarostami is really having fun with the audience. So you'll have to see it to experience it. And I'll tell one more. I really like this film called Salam Cinema. Salam Cinema is a film by this filmmaker called Makhmal Buff. So in Close Up, that guy was impersonating Makhmal Buff, actually. So they're very interesting connections. Like Iranian cinema is very interesting. So in Salam Cinema, what happens is that it's the 100th year of cinema. And Makhmal Buff wants to make a film about dedicating the film to cinema. Basically, he wants to dedicate the film to cinema. So he gives out a call for auditions. And like 10,000 people come to give the auditions. So the film starts with that scene where you have these, like, it's almost like a mob situation, riot situation, that everyone wants to become a part of the film. So he decides that he'll make a film out of the auditions. And that's what the film is. The film is basically just the auditions for people who want to become part of the film. So it's very interesting. So I like these particular films. Close Up, you can say, is fiction, although it's very non-fiction also. And Salam Cinema, again, you wouldn't know if it's fiction or non-fiction actually. Like some parts definitely were fictionalized.
Right, these sound very interesting, and your pitches especially was very interesting. So I mean, this is definitely going on my watch list. Okay, so thanks, Amar. Thanks for taking out time to be with us. What's coming ahead? What lies ahead for you? Where can people? Do you have anything to plug? Where can people find you on social media, etc.?
Yeah. So I am pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. So people can just find me on Facebook. If they search Samarth Mahajan, I think I'll be the first or second result. Um, I don't think I have to plug in LinkedIn here. It'll be too professional. But yeah, I think connect to me. I love interacting with people who are interested in exploring documentary as a medium to express, because I also feel I am equipped to sort of share my experiences and some sort of help on those fronts. So if you are interested in at some point exploring documentaries, reach out to me with your doubts. We can discuss. We can talk about it. What lies ahead for me in terms of, like, I am obviously waiting for Borderlands to finish, to take it to festivals, to do a release. That's something I'm excited about. And I, after this, probably be taking a creative break, but trying to build an organization which sort of helps the documentary movement in India, where if someone's a budding filmmaker or an aspiring filmmaker has not started filmmaking, how can we support people? How can we ensure some sort of mentoring, one-to-one mentoring, workshops? Can we start a fellowship which will support people in making their films? Can we build these databases of grants and festivals? So that is something that I want to actively focus on, because I think in India there are a lot of nice documentary filmmakers, but there is no cohesive industry or a community. So industry, I'm not sure if I'll be able to create, or I am the like one person can create. But a community, I think, is something that I really want to create and cherish. That okay, can we bring these 30 nice documentary filmmakers on one platform, who will then in turn probably just mentor one or two people over the course of 1 or 2 months, or one call a month or one call every 2 months. Can we make that happen, and can we inspire more people to take this up professionally? Is something that I'm very excited about. Yeah.
That's great. All the best to you for that. And
Thank
I mean,
you.
I'm certainly very eager to see more and more nice documentary films come out of India.
Same
And
here.
yeah, I mean, so that was it for this episode. You can of course follow us on social media at Cut to Scene on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our social media IDs in the show notes. And yeah, I guess thanks so much once again for being with us. And yeah, we hope we wish you all the best with Borderlands as well.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you for having me here. And I had a really good time talking to you guys. And I hope that like we have more reasons to do more episodes, and more and more people are able to make the films that they want to make.
Yeah, certainly, certainly.
Inshallah.
Okay. Yeah, inshallah. On that note, let's end the episode. Thank you guys for listening, and please do write in with your suggestions and feedback. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.